So in today's video, there are going to be a couple of eerie but also normal-looking photos and videos with disturbing backstories. The first story we have is from 2010, and it's actually similar to many others we have already covered. A story where someone gets murdered by someone close. The same person, who under normal circumstances is someone you're supposed to trust and even rely on. And I don't know whether to be surprised by this at this point, but in this case, the boyfriend is the killer. The girl he killed was Rebecca Aylward, and here's how the story goes. Rebecca and Joshua met when they were 13, and their connection quickly deepened into a romantic relationship by the time they turned 14. To Rebecca's family and friends, Joshua appeared to be a typical teenager, polite, funny, and personable. However, his darker tendencies began to surface over time. He had a fascination with collecting knives and guns, a hobby that raised alarm bells for Rebecca's sister, especially after Rebecca mentioned that Joshua had playfully threatened her with a knife. Though Rebecca brushed it off as a joke, her sister sensed there was more to Joshua's behavior. After several months of dating, Joshua stayed with Rebecca's family for a weekend. But shortly after returning home, Joshua sent Rebecca a text abruptly ending their relationship. Rebecca, heartbroken and confused, pressed him for an explanation, but he refused to give one. Following the breakup, Joshua's behavior took a troubling turn. He began harassing Rebecca, spreading cruel rumors that she was pregnant. His friends later revealed that he often made disturbing comments about wanting to harm her, but they dismissed them as edgy teenage banter. One friend even jokingly promised to buy him breakfast if he followed through. Rebecca tried to move on, especially after seeing Joshua with another girl. Yet, when he reached out to her months later, expressing interest in rekindling their relationship, Rebecca still harbored feelings for him. Despite the pain he had caused her, she agreed to meet him on October 23, 2010, in a nearby wooded area. That morning, Rebecca got ready for what she believed was a chance to reconcile. She told her mother about the meeting, who was uneasy given Joshua's past behavior. Her mother called her while she was waiting for Joshua to arrive, staying on the line to ensure her safety. When Joshua showed up, Rebecca reassured her mother and hung up the phone. The two ventured deeper into the woods. As they walked, Joshua lagged behind, ensuring they were alone. Then, without warning, he picked up a rock and struck Rebecca. Despite her attempts to fight back and escape, he overpowered her and delivered a fatal blow. When Rebecca didn't return home, her worried family contacted Joshua, who feigned ignorance, claiming he hadn't seen her that day. Over the following days, he even sent texts to Rebecca's phone to maintain the illusion of concern. However, his facade began to crumble when friends and classmates recalled his troubling behavior and the location in his recent social media profile picture, a wooded area eerily similar to where Rebecca had gone missing. Authorities were alerted, and a search of the woods led to the discovery of Rebecca's body. Joshua was arrested and later tried at Swansea Crown Court. Despite initially denying his involvement and attempting to frame a friend, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 14 years. Years later, he finally confessed to the crime, offering no meaningful explanation other than that he did it because he could. This is the final photo of both of them together. In May 2015, tragedy struck a Michigan home when 46-year-old Martin Durham was found dead, and his wife, Glenna, was severely injured from gunshot wounds. At first, police believed they were dealing with an attempted double homicide. However, the truth emerged from an unexpected source, the couple's pet parrot. After the incident, Martin's parrot began repeating phrases that appeared to mimic his final words. The bird's chilling reenactment was caught on video and eventually became a key piece of evidence in the case.
Shut up! Get your building now! Shut up!
The couple had been facing serious money issues, including gambling debts, and Glenna had been hiding these problems from Martin. Investigators determined that the couple had been arguing before Glenna shot Martin and then tried to end her own life. Glenna survived and was later convicted of her husband's murder, with the parrot's behavior playing a notable role in the investigation. The parrot is now in the care of Martin's ex-wife, Christina Keller. Rachel O'Reilly, an Irish mother of two, was found brutally murdered in her Dublin home in October 2004. At first, the crime appeared to be a robbery that had gone terribly wrong. However, the truth behind her tragic death would prove far more sinister. In the weeks following Rachel's murder, her husband, Joe O'Reilly, made a public appearance on Ireland's popular talk show, The Late Late Show. Accompanied by Rachel's grieving mother, Rose, Joe used this platform to appeal for information about Rachel's death. During the broadcast, Joe speculated that Rachel must have known her killer, saying, "My view, and again it's just my personal belief, is that she knew the person."
Based on the situation you both found in the house, I mean, did you get the sense that she'd been taken unawares, that this was someone that perhaps she trusted, or...
Yeah, I think so. Where the murder happened was in the bedroom, which is the very last room of the house. So it's the room where you're least likely to bring someone you don't know because you're cornered. My view as well would be, and again it's just my view, it's not a police theory, it's just my own personal belief, is that she knew the person, because why else would you kill her? If it's a violent robbery, why go to the extreme of murdering the person unless they can identify you? And that's why we've talked about this and practically nothing else for the last 3 weeks. We just feel it's someone she would have known or someone she could have identified.
While Joe's public plea might have seemed heartfelt to some, others found his demeanor unsettling. Viewers noted that his behavior appeared unnatural and out of place for a grieving husband, raising suspicions about his sincerity. As the investigation progressed, police uncovered shocking evidence that implicated Joe in the crime. It was revealed that Joe had been having an affair with another woman and had murdered Rachel in order to pursue a new life with his mistress. His alibi quickly fell apart when investigators analyzed his cell phone records, which placed him at the scene of the crime around the time of Rachel's death. Faced with this damning evidence, Joe O'Reilly was arrested and charged with Rachel's murder. During his trial, the details of his betrayal and calculated actions horrified the public. Ultimately, Joe was convicted of the crime and sentenced to life in prison. In May 2012, a tragic house fire in Derby, England, claimed the lives of 6 children belonging to Mick Philpott. In the days following the incident, Mick and his wife, Mariad, appeared at a press conference, seemingly grief-stricken over the loss of their children. However, their behavior and body language raised suspicions among the public and investigators. As police delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a disturbing truth. Mick, Mariad, and their friend Paul Mosley had orchestrated the fire. The plan was to frame Mick's former mistress for starting the blaze, intending to gain custody of her children. This reckless and malicious scheme resulted in devastating consequences, leading to the deaths of Mick's own children. The 3 conspirators were arrested, charged, and eventually convicted of manslaughter for their roles in the tragedy.
Who tried to help save our children, they couldn't. Excuse me a minute. We've decided that through our son Dwayne, and unfortunately the last one to pass away, that we're going to donate his organs to save another child, which is what we want, because if you can save another child, that makes us happy. It takes a bit of the pain away.
Dru Sjodin. On November 22, 2003, 22-year-old Dru Sjodin was working a shift at the Victoria's Secret store in Columbia Mall, located in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Around 4 p.m., she finished her shift and decided to shop for a purse. It was in the store where she completed her purchase that Dru was last seen alive. After leaving the mall, she walked to the parking lot, heading towards her 1994 Oldsmobile Cutlass. During this time, Dru was on the phone with her boyfriend, Chris. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before the call abruptly disconnected. Initially, Chris didn't think much of it, assuming the call had dropped due to poor signal. However, over 3 hours later, at approximately 7:30 p.m., Chris received another call from Dru's phone. This time, no one spoke on the other end, and after waiting, Chris hung up. Although this raised some concern, he still didn't suspect anything sinister. The next day, Dru failed to show up for work, prompting her loved ones to contact the police. Law enforcement began their investigation by focusing on the mall, believing Dru might be trapped somewhere inside. They reviewed security footage, which showed Dru completing her purchase and heading to the parking lot. There, they discovered her vehicle still parked, which heightened suspicions of foul play. After speaking with Chris and learning about their final call, investigators theorized that Dru had been confronted by someone armed near her car, forced into another vehicle, and abducted. A little over a week later, police turned their attention to a suspect, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. A 50-year-old registered sex offender, Alfonso had recently completed a 20-year prison sentence and was living with his mother. Investigators connected Alfonso to Dru's disappearance after tracking the mysterious phone call made from Dru's phone to an area near Fisher High School in Fisher, Minnesota. Alfonso lived nearby, which raised additional concerns, especially given his proximity to a high school after being released from prison. During questioning, Alfonso admitted to being at Columbia Mall on November 22nd, but claimed he had been watching Once Upon a Time in Mexico at the theater. However, investigators discovered that the theater wasn't showing that movie at the time. Further evidence against Alfonso included a receipt for a recently purchased knife, which was later found in a cleaning solution container in his possession. Another knife found in Alfonso's vehicle bore traces of Dru's blood. On April 17, 2004, Dru's body was discovered in Crookston, Minnesota, near Alfonso's residence. Her partially clothed remains were found after snow in the area had melted. Dru's hands were bound behind her back, and a shopping bag nearby suggested she may have been suffocated. Additionally, her body bore knife wounds, though medical examiners could not definitively determine her cause of death. They concluded she likely died from one of three possibilities: a neck wound, suffocation, or exposure to the elements. Alfonso's crime became a federal matter because he abducted Dru in North Dakota, but crossed state lines into Minnesota to commit the murder. While both states lack the death penalty, federal jurisdiction made it a potential outcome. On August 30, 2006, Alfonso was convicted of kidnapping and murdering Dru. He was sentenced to death on February 8, 2007. However, Alfonso's execution never took place. In 2011, his attorneys argued that he was mentally disabled, and in 2021, the judge who had sentenced him to death overturned the sentence. Finally, in March 2023, prosecutors dropped their pursuit of the death penalty. Alfonso was instead sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on May 18th. In November 2011, the Quakers Hill nursing home in Sydney, Australia, was engulfed in a tragic fire that claimed the lives of 11 residents. As firefighters worked to extinguish the flames, the press arrived to cover the incident, conducting interviews with those involved. One interview was with Roger Dean, a nurse at the facility. Appearing shaken, Dean told reporters, "It's just overwhelming, but we got a lot of people out, so that's the main thing." What he failed to reveal, however, was that he was the one responsible for the fire. Earlier, Dean had stolen painkillers from the nursing home. To cover up his crime, he deliberately set the building ablaze. The truth came to light during the investigation, and Dean ultimately pleaded guilty to 11 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In February 1999, a group of 3 decided to take a trip to Yosemite National Park. The group included 42-year-old Carol Sund, her 16-year-old daughter Julie, and Julie's friend, Silvina Palazzo, a 16-year-old exchange student from Argentina. Carol and Julie wanted to ensure Silvina experienced as much of the U.S. as possible during her short stay. After discussing several options, they settled on visiting Yosemite National Park as a highlight of their trip. Before heading to Yosemite, the trio visited several locations across California to take in the sights. After their sightseeing tour, they checked into Cedar Lodge, a motel just outside the park. Over the next 2 days, they explored Yosemite, captured beautiful moments in photos, and enjoyed each other's company. On the evening of February 15th, as it grew late, they returned to their motel to rest before their planned departure for the airport the next morning. Julie took one last photo of her mother and Silvina to commemorate the trip, unaware that tragedy was about to strike. 2 years earlier, a man named Cary Stayner had been hired as a handyman at Cedar Lodge. On the night of February 15th, he knocked on the door of Carol's motel room, claiming there was an issue with the bathroom that needed fixing. Unsuspecting of his intentions, Carol allowed him in. After entering, Cary produced a firearm, ordering the group to remain silent. He claimed he was only interested in their money and valuables, and promised to leave them unharmed once he got what he wanted. The three complied, and Cary used duct tape to immobilize them. However, his true intentions soon became clear. He killed Carol and Silvina, but kept Julie alive, intending to fulfill his dark desires. He placed Carol and Silvina's bodies in the trunk of their rental car and forced Julie into the front seat to ensure she wouldn't attempt to escape. The following day, Carol, Julie, and Silvina failed to check out of the motel as planned. Back home, Carol's husband, Jens, waited at the airport to pick them up, but they never arrived. He tried calling Carol, but all attempts failed. Fearing the worst, he contacted the authorities, reporting his wife, daughter, and their friend as missing. Initially, it was suspected they might have gotten lost in the Yosemite wilderness, prompting a search effort. Investigators interviewed people at the motel and hikers in the area, but no significant leads emerged. Hope began to wane until Carol's wallet was found near Modesto, nearly 100 miles west of the park. This discovery raised suspicions of foul play. On March 18th, searchers found the charred remains of Carol's rental car in Stanislaus National Forest, north of the motel. Inside the trunk were the burned bodies of Carol and Silvina. Julie remained missing, and authorities held out hope she was still alive. A handwritten note with a crudely drawn map was soon sent to police. Scrawled at the top were the chilling words, "We had fun with this one." The map led authorities to Julie's remains, discovered with the help of search dogs. She had been brutally assaulted and killed with a wound to her neck. Attention turned back to Cedar Lodge, and investigators questioned the staff thoroughly. Among them was Cary Stayner, who appeared cooperative and unassuming, deflecting suspicion. In reality, he had carefully planted misleading evidence, like leaving Carol's wallet in Modesto, to throw investigators off his trail. For months, the case went cold until July, when the decapitated remains of Joy Armstrong, a young naturalist, were discovered near her Yosemite cabin. Investigators learned Cary had ambushed her after wandering the woods, tying her up and eventually killing her when she tried to escape. Witnesses placed Cary's truck near Joy's cabin, leading authorities back to him. On July 24th, he was arrested at a nudist resort. In his possession, they found a murder kit containing tools for killing and disposing of victims. Cary Stayner confessed to the murders, blaming years of trauma for his actions. His younger brother, Stephen Stayner, had been kidnapped as a child and held captive for 7 years before escaping. While Stephen was hailed as a hero upon his return, Cary grew resentful of the attention his brother received. He later admitted his crimes were partly driven by a desire to gain similar notoriety. Cary Stayner was convicted and sentenced to death in 2002. He remains on death row. In 2016, Supergirl star Melissa Benoist appeared on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon and recounted a seemingly humorous story about an accident. She described falling down a flight of stairs and landing in a potted plant, which left her with an injured eye. Laughing it off, she joked, "My whole face looked like Squirt from Finding Nemo." At the time, the story seemed lighthearted, but in 2019, Benoist revealed a much darker reality. In an emotional video, she shared her experience as a survivor of domestic violence. She recounted a specific incident eerily similar to the one she had described on the show, admitting that she and her abuser had fabricated the story about falling down the stairs to hide the truth. While Benoist didn't directly confirm a link between the two events, the revelation cast a shadow over her earlier remarks. It's heartbreaking to think of the pain she endured, hidden behind a brave smile. Colleen Ritzer was a 24-year-old math teacher at Danvers High School near Boston, Massachusetts, known for her kind and dedicated approach to teaching. On October 22, 2013, Colleen asked several students to stay after school to work on algebra. Among them was 14-year-old freshman Philip Chisholm. During the session, Colleen and Philip engaged in casual conversation, during which Colleen mentioned Philip's old hometown. For reasons unknown, this seemingly innocent remark upset Philip. Colleen noticed his discomfort and quickly changed the subject. Later that evening, surveillance footage captured Colleen leaving her classroom to use the restroom. Moments later, Philip stepped out of the classroom, paused in the hallway, and hesitated. He returned to the classroom briefly, then re-emerged with his hood pulled up. Philip was seen putting on gloves before entering the women's bathroom where Colleen had gone. Inside, Philip brutally attacked Colleen, slashing her neck with a box cutter. After killing her, he further desecrated her body. Surveillance footage later showed Philip leaving the bathroom, carrying Colleen's black trousers. 11 minutes after entering, he was recorded dragging a large recycling bin into the bathroom. Moments later, he wheeled the bin back out, now containing Colleen's body. Philip then took the bin to a nearby wooded area, where he dumped Colleen's remains. He violated her body further with a tree branch, partially covered her with leaves, and returned to the school, behaving as if nothing had happened. Thanks to the school's surveillance footage, authorities quickly discovered Colleen's body and pieced together the sequence of events. Philip was apprehended shortly after. During the investigation, his defense team attempted to argue that he was hearing voices and not responsible for his actions. However, this claim failed to convince the court. Philip later confessed that he had been triggered by a word Colleen said during their conversation, though he never disclosed what the word was. Philip Chisholm was convicted of Colleen's murder and sentenced to a minimum of 40 years in prison. A celebration meant to be joyful turned tragic for Russian Instagram influencer Ekaterina Didenko during her 29th birthday party. Held at a pool complex, the event took a devastating turn when blocks of dry ice were added to the water, reportedly to cool it down. The dry ice created a striking visual effect, covering the pool's surface with thick white vapor, which was captured on video and shared on social media. Guests jumped into the steam-filled pool, unaware of the dangers. Dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide, and as it sublimates, it releases CO2 gas, which can cause severe breathing difficulties in confined spaces. Tragically, the toxic vapor led to multiple guests losing consciousness. 3 people, including Ekaterina's husband, Valentin, lost their lives in the incident. Trevor McSkillet Heitman, a popular YouTuber and video game enthusiast, rose to prominence through his content centered on the game Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Known for his expertise in trading in-game skins, Trevor amassed significant profits and a loyal following. By December 2017, his success enabled him to purchase a high-performance McLaren 650S sports car, which he proudly showcased in a video.
Alright, what's going on, guys? McSkillet here with another video, but today I thought I would switch it up and just do a real-life video, because I've been seeing plenty of new car videos on YouTube for the longest time, and people seem to like those videos. They seem to get a lot of views, so...
In the video, Trevor marveled at the car's incredible speed, powered by its twin-turbo V8 engine. However, Trevor's career took a devastating turn when the developers of Counter-Strike banned him from the game, effectively cutting off his primary source of income. This ban stemmed from controversies surrounding the ethics and legality of skin trading and gambling, a highly scrutinized aspect of the gaming world. Struggling to cope with his financial and personal setbacks, Trevor made a tragic decision in August 2018. He drove his McLaren 650S in the wrong direction on a San Diego highway at extremely high speeds, ultimately crashing into an SUV. The collision was catastrophic, resulting in the deaths of Trevor as well as the SUV's occupants, a 43-year-old woman and her 12-year-old daughter. Many were left grappling with the stark contrast between his seemingly glamorous online persona and the deep struggles he faced in private. Akbar Salubiro. In March 2017, a shocking and tragic incident unfolded on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. A 25-year-old man named Akbar Salubiro, who lived in a small village, made his living harvesting palm fruit from tall trees using a long pole with a hook at the end. Known for his hard work and dedication, Akbar often spent long hours in the forest. On March 25th, Akbar decided to stay out later than usual. Many of his family members were away, and he had no pressing reason to return home early. As night fell, he continued working alone, which was a departure from his typical routine of harvesting alongside other villagers. Unbeknownst to him, this decision would have devastating consequences. Indonesia is home to a diverse range of wildlife, including massive reticulated pythons that can grow up to 20 feet or more. These apex predators are known for their stealth, strength, and ability to ambush prey with precision. That evening, under the cover of the dense forest, one such python silently stalked Akbar. The enormous snake struck with terrifying speed and accuracy, sinking its sharp teeth into Akbar and wrapping its powerful coils around him. Pythons use their muscular bodies to constrict prey, cutting off blood flow and oxygen until their victim succumbs. Alone and with no one nearby to help, Akbar stood no chance. Once he was lifeless, the python began the process of swallowing him whole. Back at home, Akbar's absence initially went unnoticed. His family assumed he was working late and went to bed, unaware of the horror that had unfolded. By morning, when Akbar was still missing, his family grew concerned. When his co-workers arrived at the forest to resume their work, they too noticed his absence and began asking around. As no one had seen him, a search effort was organized. The search party concentrated on the forest where Akbar had last been seen. Hours later, they found unsettling signs of his presence. One of his boots and his fruit harvesting pole were lying abandoned. Nearby, a distinctive, large trail through the underbrush raised alarm among the villagers. Those familiar with the local wildlife immediately recognized it as the path of a massive python. Following the trail, the searchers soon came upon a giant, misshapen python weighing nearly 300 pounds. The snake's bloated midsection left no doubt about what, or who, it had consumed. Acting quickly, the group captured and killed the python to confirm their worst fears. Upon cutting it open, they discovered Akbar's body, still intact but lifeless, inside the snake's stomach. Images of the gruesome discovery quickly spread across the internet, drawing worldwide attention to the incident. If you spend time on social media, you've probably seen a clip of former Ugandan dictator Idi Amin laughing on a boat. It's often shared as a GIF or meme, but the true story behind it is anything but humorous. The footage originates from a 1974 documentary where Amin was questioned about a controversial comment he had made concerning the Holocaust. Instead of addressing the question seriously, he responded with unsettling, maniacal laughter. This reaction is chilling when you consider Amin's brutal legacy. Idi Amin, who ruled Uganda from 1971 to 1979, was one of the 20th century's most infamous dictators. His regime was marked by widespread human rights abuses, political repression, ethnic persecution, and mass killings. It's estimated that his government was responsible for the deaths of 100,000 to 500,000 people. Amin targeted ethnic and political groups he viewed as threats, leading to horrific violence against Ugandans. His reign of terror didn't just affect his own country. In 1972, he expelled over 70,000 Asians from Uganda, particularly those of Indian descent, stripping them of their businesses and belongings. This act devastated Uganda's economy and worsened social tensions. Amin also sought international attention through inflammatory and bizarre statements, such as praising Hitler and making light of atrocities. The laughing clip, now trivialized as a meme, is a disturbing reminder of the arrogance and cruelty Amin displayed during his dictatorship. In 1986, NBC7 San Diego aired a segment aimed at educating viewers on what to do if stranded on a highway. The message emphasized the importance of staying inside one's vehicle rather than walking for assistance, as it was considered safer. The segment featured Rory Devine, an NBC reporter, and California Highway Patrol officer Craig Allen Pyre. During the broadcast, Pyre warned viewers about potential predators lurking on highways, stating, "Once you get in that other person's car, you're at their mercy." Shockingly, just 2 days before this segment aired, Pyre himself had committed a heinous crime. He had pulled over 20-year-old Kara Knott on the highway, murdered her, and disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge. Suspicion quickly fell on Pyre when scratches inflicted by Knott during her struggle were visible on his nose in the NBC footage. Following the segment's airing, dozens of women came forward, alleging that Pyre had pulled them over and attempted to coerce or seduce them. This pattern of abuse revealed Pyre's predatory behavior under the guise of his authority as a law enforcement officer. Craig Pyre was ultimately found guilty of Cara Nott's murder. His conviction and life sentence highlighted the dangers of abuse of power by those in positions of authority.
Being a female, you could be robbed if you're a male, all the way to where you could be killed. Once you get in that other person's car, you're at their mercy.
Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, is known for the brutal murders of 17 people between 1978 and 1991. In a chilling home video from the early 1990s, Dahmer is seen interacting casually with his father while flipping through a magazine. During their conversation, they discuss mundane topics such as Dahmer's weight and his eating habits. Dahmer mentions that he had been relying heavily on McDonald's for meals and adds that he needs to start eating at home more often. He comments, "I've been surviving mostly on McDonald's. It's just so much easier to pop into the restaurant, but it gets too expensive." However, his seemingly innocuous remark about eating at home takes on a deeply sinister undertone when considering his later acts of cannibalism, in which he consumed parts of his victims.
Well, you're looking good. Grandma was saying that she thought that you got quite a bit thinner, but you look fit. I don't know.
Well, I've been surviving mostly on McDonald's food. It's just so much easier just to pop into the restaurant. But
yeah,
like I've said before, it gets too expensive, and
it does.
I have to start eating at home more.
Carmen Miranda, famously known as the Brazilian bombshell, rose to international stardom in the 1930s as a samba dancer, singer, and actor. With her vibrant costumes and lively performances, she became a beloved icon of Latin American culture. On August 4th, 1955, Carmen appeared on The Jimmy Durante Show, an NBC variety program, to film a performance with the host. For the staff and cast, it seemed like an ordinary workday. However, Carmen's health was failing. During one of her strenuous dance routines, she dropped to a knee, clutching her chest, and told Durante that she was out of breath. Despite this moment of apparent distress, Carmen laughed it off and carried on with the performance, maintaining her professional demeanor until the show's conclusion. Unbeknownst to everyone present, Carmen Miranda was in critical condition. She had been a heavy smoker, drinker, and regular user of amphetamines, which had taken a severe toll on her health. Tragically, Carmen suffered a fatal heart attack between 3 and 10 a.m. the following morning. She was just 46 years old. The episode of The Jimmy Durante Show featuring Carmen's final performance did not air until over 2 months after it was filmed. Sean Vincent Gillis is a chilling example of a serial killer who operated under the radar for years, preying on vulnerable individuals in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Though his father's absence could have been a reprieve from potential negative influence, Sean's own trajectory was grim. Gillis's criminal history began in his teenage years, with arrests for DUI, drug possession, and other offenses. By his 30s, his violent fantasies escalated to brutal realities. Gillis later admitted to harboring dark thoughts for years, an obsession that ultimately manifested in his killing spree. Gillis's first known murder occurred in 1994. His victim, 81-year-old Ann Bryan, lived in a retirement home. Gillis entered her residence, intending to assault her, but panicked when she resisted and screamed. In a frenzy, he stabbed her over 50 times, leaving a gruesome crime scene. Despite the brutality, investigators initially didn't connect Gillis to the crime. For 5 years, he stayed dormant, though his morbid interests grew more explicit. His girlfriend, Terry Lemoyne, noticed his fixation with violent media, but dismissed it as harmless fantasy. In 1999, Gillis struck again, murdering 29-year-old Catherine Hall. He lured her into his car, strangled her, and mutilated her body. Gillis later admitted to assaulting her post-mortem. He left her body at a construction site near a dead-end sign. Shortly after, Gillis targeted Hardy Schmidt, a 52-year-old jogger. After stalking her for weeks, he hit her with his car and strangled her before disposing of her body 2 days later. His pattern of targeting women continued, with multiple victims in 1999 and 2000, including Joyce Williams, Lillian Robinson, and Marilyn Nevels. Each murder showcased Gillis's escalating violence, marked by post-mortem and necrophags. Gillis's killing spree culminated in 2004 with the murder of Donna Bennett Johnston. He dumped her body in a drainage area near Louisiana State University, leaving behind tire tracks that became crucial evidence. Investigators identified the uncommon Goodyear tires as belonging to a limited production run, leading them to compile a list of purchasers. Among them was Sean Gillis. DNA evidence eventually tied him to multiple murders. During a search of Gillis's home, authorities uncovered damning evidence, including photographs of his victims and body parts he had kept as trophies. This is also where police found seemingly normal photos he took of himself while he committed these crimes. When confronted, Gillis confessed without hesitation, showing no remorse. In one chilling statement, he declared, "I'm sorry I hurt people, but I would do it again. You let me out on the street, I'll find somebody before sundown." In 2004, Gillis was convicted and received multiple life sentences. Despite the heinous nature of his crimes, he avoided the death penalty. His mother, Yvonne, attempted to portray him as a kind and harmless man, but the evidence painted a different picture. A remorseless predator driven by depraved urges. Today he serves his life sentences in Louisiana State Penitentiary. The murder of Skylar Neese is a tragic story that began in the small town of Star City, West Virginia. Skylar, a bright and outgoing 16-year-old, lived with her parents, David and Mary. From an early age, she had close friendships, particularly with Morgan Lawrence. Over time, Skylar formed new bonds, including one with Sheila Eddy, a vivacious and confident girl she met in high school. The duo later befriended Rachel Schoaf, completing their tight-knit trio. Teachers and classmates described the three girls as inseparable, but noted their tendency toward rebellious behavior, including rumors of underage drinking and drug use. Despite this, their friendship seemed strong until the summer of 2012, when things took a horrifying turn. On the night of July 5, 2012, Skylar returned home late after working her shift at Wendy's. Unbeknownst to her parents, she snuck out of the house shortly after midnight, using a small stool to climb out of her bedroom window. CCTV footage later captured Skylar voluntarily getting into a three-door sedan outside her home. When Skylar failed to return the next morning and missed her shift at work, her parents became alarmed and reported her missing. Skylar's best friends, Sheila and Rachel, initially cooperated with the investigation, claiming they had picked her up that night for a joyride. According to their story, Skylar had asked to be dropped off at the end of her street, and they hadn't seen her since. However, inconsistencies in their accounts began to raise suspicions. For months, the case stalled as investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Rachel and Sheila continued their lives, even feigning grief over Skylar's disappearance. The facade crumbled in December 2012 when Rachel's mental health began to deteriorate. Under immense pressure, she confessed to the police that she and Sheila had murdered Skylar. Rachel revealed chilling details of the crime. On the night of July 5th, the two girls lured Skylar into Sheila's car, driving her to a secluded wooded area in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Pretending it was just another late-night hangout, they waited until Skylar's back was turned before attacking her with knives they had hidden in their hoodies. Skylar fought valiantly, even managing to injure Rachel, but she was ultimately overpowered. After the murder, the girls attempted to bury Skylar's body but abandoned the effort and covered her with branches and debris instead. For months, they kept up appearances, with Sheila even posting tributes to Skylar on social media. The motive behind the murder remains unclear, though Rachel claimed they killed Skylar simply because they didn't like her anymore. There is speculation that Skylar may have known secrets about Rachel and Sheila's relationship, potentially including a romantic involvement, which the girls feared she might reveal. In January 2013, Skylar's remains were discovered, confirming Rachel's confession. Sheila was sentenced to life in prison, while Rachel, who cooperated with authorities, received a reduced sentence of 30 years. Two girls in Texas made headlines for all the wrong reasons when they stumbled upon the body of 25-year-old Marcus Adams. While their reaction to finding a deceased person could have been attributed to shock or grief, their subsequent actions were deeply unsettling and outright disrespectful. Rather than contacting authorities or showing any sign of concern, the girls chose to laugh and post videos of Marcus's body on Snapchat. One of them even admired the necklace Marcus was wearing and decided to steal it directly from his lifeless body. The entire ordeal, including the theft, was documented on their Snapchat accounts. Afterward, the girls returned home and continued their appalling behavior by making a TikTok video, seemingly using Marcus's tragic death as an opportunity for internet clout. Thankfully, their actions did not go unnoticed. Outraged followers who saw the Snapchat posts reported the girls to the police. As a result, both were arrested and charged with theft of a human corpse. The incident devastated Marcus's family, who had already lost someone they loved dearly. Seeing his body treated with such disrespect only added to their grief. In a statement, they described the girls' behavior as heartless and cruel, but vowed to continue honoring Marcus's memory despite the tragedy. The image on the screen right now is the last known photograph of 6-year-old Madison Jamison, taken shortly before her disappearance, along with her parents, Bobby and Sherilyn. The Jamison family vanished in October 2009 after scheduling a visit to inspect a 40-acre plot of land near Red Oak, Oklahoma. Their disappearance remains one of the most puzzling and haunting cases in modern history. On the day they vanished, the family planned to view the rural property as part of their goal to relocate to a quieter, more remote area. Strangely, Bobby and Sherilyn requested the real estate agent not accompany them, though the reason behind this remains unclear. Despite their scheduled appointment, the family was not reported missing until approximately a week later. Friends and family noted that Bobby and Sherilyn were deeply religious and believed their home might be under threat from malevolent spirits. The couple faced personal struggles as well. Bobby suffered from chronic back pain following a car accident in 2013, and Sherilyn battled depression and bipolar disorder, often avoiding her prescribed medications. These challenges may have influenced their decision to seek a fresh start in an isolated environment. The Jamisons envisioned living in converted metal shipping containers on the property, adding an unusual aspect to their plans. On October 17, 2009, nearly a week after their disappearance, hunters discovered the family's abandoned truck in a remote area. Inside, authorities found puzzling clues: Sherilyn and Bobby's cell phones, a GPS device, maps, $32,000 in cash, and the family's malnourished dog, Maisie. The presence of such a large amount of cash raised suspicions, but the contents of the vehicle provided no clear answers. Nearby, investigators followed small footprints believed to belong to Madison. These tracks led to a hilltop, where it is believed the final photo of her was taken, discovered later on a recovered cell phone. This image has sparked debate. Some interpret Madison's expression as distressed or fearful, while others see it as neutral. Speculation arose that the person behind the camera might not have been her parents, though this remains uncertain. Authorities believe the family spent no more than 15 minutes in the woods before returning to their vehicle, but what happened after remains a mystery. Despite an extensive search involving over 100 volunteers, tracking dogs, and law enforcement, no trace of the Jamisons was initially found. An 11-page letter written by Sherilyn was discovered in the truck, in which she expressed frustration with her husband, describing him as reclusive and detailing her intent to seek a divorce. While this document hinted at marital discord, family and friends insisted Sherilyn deeply loved her husband and child. Years later, on November 16, 2013, the skeletal remains of Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison were discovered 3 miles from their abandoned truck. Severe decomposition left medical examiners unable to determine a definitive cause of death, though a small hole in the back of Bobby's skull suggested a potential gunshot wound. Various theories emerged. Some speculated Sherilyn, struggling with her mental health and carrying a handgun, may have been involved, but her friends vehemently denied this, pointing out her devotion to her family. Others suggested foul play, perhaps linked to the $32,000 found in the truck, hinting at possible involvement with illicit activities. Some posited that the family was kidnapped and led into the woods at gunpoint, as no signs of struggle were found in the vehicle. Bobby's father, with whom he had a contentious relationship, was briefly considered a suspect, but was ultimately ruled out due to his being in a nursing home at the time. Despite years of investigation and speculation, the true fate of the Jamison family remains unknown. Chris Watts gained national infamy as the subject of the Netflix documentary American Murder: The Family Next Door, but on August 14, 2018, viewers of Denver 7 News saw him as a concerned husband and father. Watts appeared on the news pleading for the safe return of his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and their 2 young daughters, Bella and Celeste, who had been reported missing. During the interview, Watts described his concern over Shanann not responding to messages and explained how a friend, Nicole, had called him when she couldn't reach Shanann. Despite his words, many found his lack of visible emotion unsettling. At first glance, it seemed like a standard report about a missing family, but the truth would soon be revealed. The very next day, Chris Watts failed a polygraph test and confessed to killing Shanann. Initially, he claimed that Shanann had killed their daughters in a fit of rage and that he had killed her in retaliation. However, this story unraveled, and Watts eventually admitted to murdering his entire family. His motive, reportedly, was his desire to start a new life with his mistress. In a harrowing account, it was revealed that Watts had strangled Shanann at their home and then driven her body, along with his daughters, who were still alive at the time, to an oil site. There, he smothered his daughters and disposed of their bodies in oil tanks, burying Shanann in a shallow grave nearby. Watts's chilling case shocked the nation, not only for the brutal nature of the crimes, but also for his cold demeanor during the news interview. In November 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never leave prison.
Chris Watts, W-A-T-T-S.
What's going on right now around your house?
Right now, you got K9 units, the sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent and see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere. And right now, it's just like they've been on point. They're going through that.
This tragic case unfolds in Essex, England, centering on Jennifer Cronin and her daughter Susan. Jennifer and Susan shared an incredibly close bond. Susan had always admired her mother and sought her approval, especially when it came to life decisions like choosing a partner. In the late 1980s or early 1990s, Susan, then a hairdresser, met Kieran Lynch, a construction worker 3 years her senior. She was drawn to Kieran's hardworking nature and gentle demeanor, envisioning him as a loving partner and father. However, Susan's mother's approval was paramount, and thankfully Jennifer liked Kieran too. The couple married in the mid-1990s and had 2 daughters, Matilda and Molly. For a time, the Lynch family seemed picture perfect, with 2 doting parents and cheerful children. Even Jennifer was a frequent visitor, and her granddaughters adored her. Yet beneath this idyllic facade, cracks were forming in Susan and Kieran's marriage. Kieran was determined to excel at everything, which drove him to work grueling hours in physically demanding jobs. This self-imposed pressure left him mentally and physically drained, leading to anger outbursts at home. Initially, these episodes involved yelling and breaking objects. Over time, he began turning to alcohol to cope, which only exacerbated his temper. On some occasions, his anger escalated into violence against the very family he worked tirelessly to support. After his outbursts, Kieran would apologize, promising to change, but his resolve never lasted. Susan found herself reflecting on how the man she married had transformed into someone so volatile. Hoping he would eventually return to his former self, she kept his behavior hidden, fearing external intervention might make things worse. Their daughters, aware of the tension, tried to support their mother as best they could. When friends or family asked about her husband, Susan covered for him, concealing the stress she endured. But the truth became harder to hide. A friend encountered Kieran in public and was shocked by his appearance. He was gaunt and haggard, a far cry from his former self. Along with his stress, another factor contributed to his decline. Around 2014 or 2015, Susan discovered an illegal substance in Kieran's work clothes while doing laundry. This revelation stunned her. Though she understood the immense pressure he faced, she hadn't suspected he'd turned to drugs. When Susan confronted him, Kieran reacted with anger, but begged her not to tell their children. She agreed, but insisted he seek help to address his issues. Kieran, however, offered no response and made no effort to change. In the following weeks, Susan noticed unusual transactions on her credit card, which she traced back to Kieran. When confronted, he grew hostile, and their relationship began to spiral further. His threats escalated to include harming both Susan and himself. Fearing for their safety, Susan considered confiding in her mother, but worried it might put Jennifer in danger. Eventually, she decided to leave Kieran after more than 2 decades of marriage. Despite their turbulent history, Susan still cared for him, and though Kieran resisted at first, he reluctantly agreed it was for the best. Susan and her daughters flourished after separating. Free from the constant fear of Kieran's temper, they began to rebuild their lives. Susan even found a new partner, Mike, whom her daughters grew fond of. Although they hadn't finalized their divorce, Susan contacted Kieran to discuss making it official. She shared her happiness with Mike and their children's acceptance of him. Kieran seemed supportive and agreed to sign the papers. However, this apparent peace was short-lived. On January 11, 2018, Kieran sent Susan a series of violent, angry messages, demanding $60,000 in exchange for his signature on the divorce papers. That same day, Kieran showed up at Susan's home, smashing items on her patio with a hammer. Terrified, Susan hid and called the police. While Kieran fled before their arrival, he later returned, leading to his arrest after a confrontation with the officers. Charged with weapon possession, property damage, and threatening behavior, he was granted bail under strict conditions to stay away from Susan and her family. Yet Kieran ignored these restrictions, repeatedly harassing Susan, her daughters, and even Jennifer through calls, messages, and visits. Despite Susan's repeated reports to authorities, little action was taken. The harassment escalated to the point where Kieran began tampering with Susan's home, cutting power, and leaving a mess in the yard. He also targeted Jennifer's house, knocking on her windows late at night. Susan's pleas for help were met with dismissive responses, with police downplaying the danger. On March 13, 2018, the situation reached its tragic climax. Susan had stopped by Jennifer's house to pick up Molly. As Jennifer tended her garden, Kieran appeared suddenly, dousing her in petrol while hurling insults. Susan, watching from a window, called the police and tried to flee with Molly. But unable to leave her mother, she returned, only to witness Kieran setting both Jennifer and himself on fire. Emergency services arrived to find both victims critically injured. Kieran and Jennifer were rushed to the hospital but succumbed to their injuries, Jennifer after 2 weeks of fighting for her life. Susan described her mother's final moments as peaceful, despite the horrific circumstances. In contrast, Kieran's daughters struggled to reconcile their memories of him as a kind father with the heinous crime he had committed. The case sparked public outrage, with many criticizing law enforcement for failing to act on the warning signs. Though Kieran's mental health struggles and substance abuse were well documented, no measures were taken to protect Susan and her family from the inevitable tragedy. On April 15, 2013, the Boston Marathon was rocked by a devastating act of terrorism when 2 pressure cooker bombs were detonated near the finish line. The attack killed 3 people and injured over 260 others. Just 30 minutes after carrying out this heinous act, one of the perpetrators, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, was captured on security footage at a Boston area Whole Foods. Dressed in black, Tsarnaev entered the store, purchased a carton of milk, and left without incident. The footage shows no indication of his involvement in the tragedy that had just unfolded. Remarkably, the milk was reportedly intended for his 2-year-old niece, adding a chilling layer of normalcy to his actions in the immediate aftermath of mass violence. Dzhokhar and his older brother, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, were identified as the masterminds behind the attack. Their actions triggered a massive manhunt that gripped the nation. During the pursuit, Tamerlan was killed in a confrontation with law enforcement, while Dzhokhar evaded capture for several days. He was eventually discovered hiding in a boat in a Watertown backyard on April 19th, 4 days after the bombing. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was arrested, tried, and convicted for his role in the bombing. He received a death sentence, though legal appeals have kept the case ongoing. He is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado, where he remains under tight security. Roller coaster malfunction. On March 24, 2022, 14-year-old Tyre Sampson visited Icon Park in Orlando, Florida, with his two best friends. The trio was excited to ride the Freefall Drop Tower, a 430-foot-tall amusement ride advertised as one of the tallest freefall experiences in the world. But Tyre's experience would tragically end in disaster. As the group prepared for the ride, a photo was taken showing the boys seated and ready. In the image, Tyre's harness is visibly loose compared to those of his friends. This was the first clear indication that something was wrong. The ride's harnesses were equipped with sensors designed to alert operators of potential safety issues. However, while the sensors reportedly flagged Tyre's harness as unsafe, the ride still operated. Whether due to negligence, oversight, or miscommunication, the warning was ignored. As the ride began its ascent, Tyre quickly realized something was amiss. At over 400 feet in the air, he became visibly panicked. Sweating and terrified, he must have understood that there was no way to fix his harness at that height. In the moments before the drop, Tyre turned to his friends with heartbreaking words, "Tell my mom and dad I love them." When the ride plummeted toward the ground, Tyre slipped from his loose harness and fell to his death. Rylee Goodrich and Anthony Barajas. Rylee Goodrich, an 18-year-old recent high school graduate from California, had a bright future ahead of her. On July 26, 2021, she decided to spend an evening out with Anthony Barajas, a 19-year-old TikTok star with over 1 million followers. The pair seemed to be enjoying themselves, going on a date to see a movie at the Regal Edwards Theater in Corona, California. But their fun night would take a horrifying turn when they unknowingly crossed paths with 23-year-old Joseph Jimenez. Jimenez, who later claimed to hear voices commanding him to commit violent acts, entered the same movie theater. These supposed voices grew louder, tormenting him and driving him to commit an unthinkable crime. During the screening, Jimenez produced a firearm and fatally shot both Rylee and Anthony. Rylee died instantly, while Anthony was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Anthony succumbed to his injuries a few days later. Jimenez was arrested and charged with the murders of Rylee and Anthony. His defense attorney argued that he was mentally ill at the time of the killings, claiming he was suffering from auditory hallucinations. However, the court determined that Jimenez was fully aware of his actions and their consequences. The judge ruled that he had ample opportunity to stop, but chose to proceed with the murders. As a result, Jimenez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would remain behind bars for the rest of his life. This is the final TikTok on Rylee Goodrich's account, uploaded just hours before the tragedy. Jaxxyn Wood. On July 15, 2021, 19-year-old Jaxxyn Wood from Danville, Kentucky, headed to work at a job that seemed tailor-made for him. Jaxxyn was a commercial diver for LG's power plant, a career that perfectly aligned with his lifelong love of swimming. Having competed in swimming for years, Jaxxyn traced his passion for the water back to his childhood, where he and several of his siblings had shared this love, often competing together. This job was even more special because Jaxxyn got to work alongside his older brother, combining their shared passion for swimming into a dream career. The two brothers had spent their youth swimming together, and now they were working together in the water they loved. On that day, Jaxxyn was tasked with inspecting intake pipes and screens underwater. As he descended, everything seemed routine. His communication equipment allowed the crew members on the surface to guide him, ensuring his safety. But then, something went wrong. Without warning, Jaxxyn's audio communication abruptly cut off. The crew on the surface frantically tried to re-establish contact, but the signal was completely lost. As the minutes passed and Jaxxyn failed to resurface, concern grew into fear. It was soon discovered that there had been a malfunction in the pipe Jaxxyn was inspecting. The malfunction caused a sudden and powerful suction, pulling Jaxxyn into the pipe. His final moments were ones of unimaginable fear and silence as he drowned in the depths of the water he had loved so deeply. The next day, Jaxxyn's body was recovered, confirming the worst fears of his family and colleagues. The tragic loss devastated all who knew him. A memorial ceremony was held by his former swim coach, honoring the young man whose life had been tragically cut short.